on because God said, I want to show you a land. And it says he went out not knowing where he was going to go. And I admire his faith that Rich referred to, calling it Moses, but he caught himself and fixed it as any of us up here hope we do. My wife says sometimes I preach heresy and don't even know it up here. So for my lack of self-awareness when I'm talking, forgive me. But that was one moment where historically it became clear that Abraham had a heart that his son go to the north. Later we see what you read this morning from Genesis 27, that Rebekah kind of is a pretense because she was trying to find an occasion for Jacob to leave when Esau wanted to kill him for having stolen his blessing through deceit. She says, I'm tired of the daughters of Heth, the Hittites. And that was referring to Esau and his wives. And so she sends Jacob, or she complains to Isaac, who then sends Jacob up to the north to get his own wife. Not this time, he doesn't send a servant to do it. He gets his own. And then Esau figures out, well, if it's from the family my parents want, then he goes, I'll go to Ishmael, who still was on the outside of the covenant blessings God had promised. Just Esau didn't seem to have the heart. And his choice to marry outside the faith community caused a grief to his parents. And you read that in the first verses from Genesis 26, verses 34 and 35. Esau's wives, it says, they brought grief to Isaac and Rebekah. They didn't share their faith. They had a pagan cultural mindset, a cultural world that was influenced by their values, their religions, their way of thinking. It's not all fleshed out for us. Some of it later in Israelites' history, we see things like where they would actually offer their own children in sacrifice to these fake gods that they manufactured themselves. I don't know what kind of darkness overwhelms somebody that they would give their own offspring to something that they created. But that's what they did. Isaiah describes these idols as having eyes but not seeing, and ears that don't hear, and mouths that don't speak. And he describes them as they take a piece of wood, and from the same piece of wood they carve an idol, and then they throw the other part in the fire to burn it as fuel. And yet they go, here's who we're going to worship. That's a darkness. And God didn't want those who were following him, the people of the covenant, to go that way. And so later on, there were laws that were established in Israel's history. Esau didn't have that. But I want you to see what God's heart is that was in a veiled way revealed when Abraham said to Isaac, to the servant, I want you to go get a wife up north from my family. It's kind of a, have you've been in those bathrooms where they have the mirrors that are like brushed metal? It's not quite as good as seeing a glass mirror that's backed with silver on the backing. So you can't see as clearly. But it's that kind of a dim look at the heart of God that he wants us to marry people that are going to support our faith and our love for him. So I want to read for you some text today from Deuteronomy chapter 7. I'm going to try to go fairly quickly just because I'm not preaching this text. I'm more using it for illustration. These are the words from Moses before the Israelites were getting to go into the land under Joshua to conquer the land. And it says, when the Lord your God brings you into the land where you are entering to possess it, this is Deuteronomy 7 verse 1, and clears away many nations before you. And this was going to take at least 10 years. My memory is failing me, is it 10 or 20, but it's a long time, the conquest of the land. And he names those nations, the Hittites, which Esau has married 2 of them. The Hittites, the Girgashites, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites, 7 nations greater and stronger than you, the Israelites. And when the Lord your God delivers them before you, and you defeat them, then you shall utterly destroy them. You shall make no covenant with them, show no favor to them. Furthermore, here's what I want you to see. You shall not intermarry with them. You shall not give your daughters to their sons, nor take their daughters for your sons, for they will turn your sons away from following me to serve other gods. And then the anger of the Lord will be kindled against you, and he will quickly destroy you. But this you shall do to them, because God is wanting to preserve the singular worship of him. You shall tear down their altars and smash their sacred pillars and hew down their asherim and burn their graven images with fire. For you, the Israelites, the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, you are a holy people to the Lord your God. The Lord your God has chosen you to be a people for his own possession out of all the peoples of the face of the earth. The Lord did not set his love on you or choose you because you were more in number than any of the peoples, for you were the fewest of all the peoples. But he chose you because the Lord loved you and kept the oath which he swore to your forefathers. That would be Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. The Lord brought you out of Egypt. They were slaves, and it was the Exodus. He brought you out by a mighty hand and redeemed you from the house of slavery, from the hand of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. Know, therefore, that the Lord your God, he is God, the faithful God, who keeps his covenant and his loving kindness to 1,000 generations with those who love him and keep his commandment. But he repays those who hate him to their faces, to destroy them. He will not delay with him who hates him. He will repay him to his face. And the Canaanites and all the other ites were a people that hated God. They were resisting the work of God. Now, an example of where a man's heart were led astray is King Solomon years later. It says King Solomon, this is 1 Kings 11, verses 1 through 13, loved many foreign women along with the daughter of Pharaoh, and describes these foreign women. Moabite, Ammonite, Edomite, by the way, those are descendants of Esau. Edomite, Sidonian, and Hittite women from the nations concerning which the Lord had said to the sons of Israel. He'd said it in Exodus, and he also said it in Deuteronomy. You shall not associate with them, nor shall they associate with you, for they will surely turn your heart away after their gods. Solomon held fast to these, it doesn't say who, but I'll supply the object. He held fast to these foreign women in love. He had 700 wives, princesses, and 300 concubines, and his wives turned his heart away. It says, for when Solomon was old, his wives turned his heart away after other gods, and his heart was not wholly devoted to the Lord his God as the heart of his father David had been. For Solomon went after, or meaning worshipped, Ashtoreth, the goddess of the Sidonians, and after Milcom, the detestable idol of the Ammonites. Solomon did what was evil in the sight of the Lord and did not follow the Lord fully as David his father had done. And this is talking trend, not saying that David never sinned. We know David sinned. But the trend of his life was that he pursued and walked with God. Then Solomon built a high place for Chemosh, the detestable idol of Moab, on the mountain which is east of Jerusalem. and for Moloch, the detestable idol of the sons of Ammon. He also built a high place. And thus he did for all his foreign wives who burned incense and sacrificed to their gods. Now the Lord was angry with Solomon because his heart was turned away from the Lord, the God of Israel, who had appeared to him twice and had commanded him concerning this thing, that he should not go after other gods. But he didn't observe what the Lord had commanded. So the Lord said to Solomon, because you have done this, and have not kept my covenant and my statutes which I've commanded you, I will surely tear the kingdom from you, and will give it to your servant. Nevertheless, I will not do it in your days for the sake of your father David, but I will tear it out of the hand of your son. However, I will not tear away all the kingdom, but I will give one tribe to your son for the sake of my servant David and for the sake of Jerusalem, which I have chosen. He had promised David that someone would reign on his throne forever. And someone from Judah, eventually leading to Christ, who will reign forever on the earth, is going to descend later. This is just an illustration of God's concern, and we're going to see it in Esau's choices, but it's going to be more subtle than what you see here in Solomon. And so we're going to begin in Genesis chapter 36, where Esau has 3 Canaanite wives and the 5 sons that are in Canaan. It says, and so turn with me if you're not there already to Genesis chapter 36. And people of grace, I'm trusting you today and you're trusting me. We have a genealogy, and like the whole chapter is essentially a genealogy of Esau or of the people that he intermarried with. And so I presume something's happening to you even as I'm speaking right now. You hear the word genealogy and your eyes are glazing over and you go, if I'd have known, I'd have stayed home. And I would have watched a better preacher on TV. And it might have been a better preacher on TV. But I'm trusting that you're going to work with me like I had to work to understand what God revealed, and He's preserved this text for us. And there's things to see that I think are still worth seeing, but they're shades of this text. They're not necessarily blatant for them to jump out as. We kind of have to think about it. And I'm sharing some of what I've thought about this week, and hopefully you can remember these shades as we're going through. It says in Genesis 36, verse 1, these are the records of the generations of Esau, that is Edom. Edom is a word that means red. And if you remember our Esau history, Esau first traded away his birthright for a red bowl of stew. And then he had red skin when he was born. So his nickname became Red. But Edom, to the people that would read this, is a portion of land that's to the south and southeast of the Dead Sea. And it's where he's going to end up settling that took this name, Red, associated with Esau and his descendants. It says in verse 2, Esau took wives from the daughters of Canaan. And the reason I had you read the verses at the beginning of this message was to remind you what had occurred. The daughters of Canaan, it said, brought grief to Isaac and Rebekah. And Canaanites it's kind of like saying you're from the South. Okay, I'm from the South, but the South includes Texas and Louisiana and Georgia and Mississippi and all these places. If they had ites, Texites and Louisianaites and Mississippiites, it would be kind of like what Canaan is. So when it says the daughters of Canaan, it's the generic big term for lots of ites that live in these various places in the land of Canaan. So they're foreign women that he has married, and they brought grief to his parents. Just like any of you, if your kids married someone that wasn't a believer and you saw the differences in the value system, you know how it brings pain. So he took wives from the daughters of Canaan, and it lists them. Ada, the daughter of Elon the Hittite, and Oholibamah, which means tent or shrine of a cultic high place. Her name has to do with the worship that was done cultically there. She's the daughter of Anna, who is a descendant of one of the peoples that lived in what became Edom after Esau and his family settled there. But it was also called Seir, S-E-I-R, Seir. And she's the granddaughter of Zibeon the Hivite. So Ada, Oholibamah, and Basemath. We're going to see, I think, 2 Basemaths here, so it may have been a common name like someone named Janet and someone else named Janet. I don't know. But here, Basemath, who is Ishmael's daughter, she is also the sister of Nebaioth. Now, Dr. Alan Ross, in the Bible Knowledge Commentary, notes some things that you might note, and I've included a chart on the back of your notes, and it's also going to be up here. If you notice on the left column up here, from Genesis 26, we have 2 wives named Judith and Basemath. And then in the middle column, we have the 3rd wife that's been mentioned when Esau married from the descendants of Ishmael, and her name is Mahalath, or I don't know, that's how I'm saying it. I don't know how you say it. So we've got these 3 women, but now in the 3rd column over there, we have Genesis 36, and we have Oholibamah, not Judith. We have Ada, not Basemath, and then I have a Basemath, not Mahalath. And some of you go, well, maybe the 3rd Basemath over there is the 2nd Basemath over here. But I want you to see certain things about these certain wives, because we have Oholibamah, Ada, and Basemath. Oholibamah is the daughter of Anna. And it's thought that Anna discovered some springs, and if you look at Genesis 36, verse 24, he's discovered springs, and his name might have been changed. I suspect it was changed to what I have over here in the first box on the left, Spring Man. That's what Beery means. He found some springs, and so he got nicknamed by what he found. Does that make sense? So if I'm right, Anna and Beery are the same. Do I know that they're same? No. Then I have Basemath, the daughter of Elon the Hittite. Well, over on the right, I have Ada, the daughter of Elon the Hittite. Dads are the same, but did Ada's name change like perhaps Beery's name changed? Maybe. And then, even though I have Basemath in this first column in the 2nd spot, I have a Basemath in the 3rd spot in the 3rd column. Are you staying with me, or am I losing you? Hopefully you're staying with me. But Ishmael, it says Ishmael's daughter. Ishmael's died, so this is a descendant of Ishmael. The sister of Nebaioth, and they have the exact same things describing them as in the middle column at the bottom. So it seems to me, when I look at this, if Beery got nicknamed, if his original name was Anna, but he found a spring and got known as Spring Man, Beery, they're the same. And Mahalath and Basemath over here sound like the same because they have the same lineage described. And then if they're the same people, then I would go, this Basemath in the first column is Ada in the 3rd column. And that's if there were only 3 wives ever, and they are described as the first 2 that he married, the Hittite women, who are daughters of the Canaanites. And then Ishmael, who was of the not covenant family, descended from Abraham, but remember Ishmael was Hagar's son, not Sarah's son. So either he had 6 wives, and by the time Genesis 36 happens, there's an explanation of why now there's only 3, or they are different names for the same people. And so now I want to try, if I haven't totally lost you yet, to help you see what Dr. Alan Ross says about this. He was my Hebrew professor at Dallas. He says, since 2 of these wives' names are not the same as those listed earlier, either 1, the others had died, so the first 3 had died, or 2, he favored the third column among his 6, so they only discussed the ones he favored, or 2 of them took different names. That's my suspicion. So I think Judith and Aholibama, top column, are the same. I think Basemath in the first column, the second in the middle, is the same as Ada over there. And Mahalath and Basemath are the same in the third. I don't know. So either there was 6 and he favored 3, or their names were changed. I'm trying to synthesize the text. Jesus said to God, "Thy word is truth." Truth, to be truth, has to be, by definition, non-contradictory. So when we have what could be perceived as an apparent contradiction, I have different names in the first 2 columns than I have in the third column, sort of. If it's true, what I have to do is go, how can they all be true and not be contradictory? Otherwise, I've got a problem here and it doesn't fit right. And so Dr. Alan Ross, my Hebrew professor, says here's 3 options. He doesn't know which of the 3 it is. I've told you which I think it is and why. But I don't know for sure. But did I do injustice to the text? Did I twist it to make it mean something that it couldn't mean? And I don't think I did that. So whenever you try to reconcile the text, you can't twist it. You can't make it mean something fantastic that's just like, it could never mean that, but he says it means that. That's not fair to the text. So what I try to do is go, how do we put these together in an intelligent way that takes the information we're given? And that's why I notice the daughter of Elon the Hittite in the first column for Basemath is the same descriptor of Ada, the daughter of Elon the Hittite, in the third column in the middle. That's why I notice that Mahalath and Basemath have the same descriptor of their dads. And I go, is it unreasonable to go that Anna and Beeri could be the same, and Beeri got a nickname because he found the spring? And that highlights his latter name as it was first known in Genesis 26, but they mention his former name in Genesis 36. Could those happen and not be twisting the text in an unreal way? And I go, yes, they could. And you might be going, what's this got to do with me? I'll get there. But I've highlighted some of it when I noticed in verse 2 it says, he took his wives from the daughters of Canaan, from the unbelieving community. And I noticed that the Ishmael was also, he may have been a descendant of Abraham, but he wasn't from the covenant people. Well, then what we see is God's favor that's been, and there's a summary statement, I don't want to miss it, in verse 4. Ada bore Eliphaz to Esau. Basemath bore Reuel, which means friend of God, or El is my friend. El is a Hebrew word for God. And Aholibama bore Jeush, Jalam, and Korah, which funny means bald head. So we have 5 sons here that are mentioned. There's the 3 wives, Ada, Basemath, and Aholibama. Ada has Eliphaz, that's the first son. Basemath has Reuel, the second son. And Aholibama has 3 sons, Jeush, Jalam, and Korah. So that's the 5 sons of Elah. And so it says in summary These are the sons of Esau who were born to him in the land of Canaan. Now then, Esau has become wealthy. While Jacob was becoming wealthy up north, Esau was becoming wealthy in the south. And it says in verse 6, Esau took his wives and his sons and his daughters, all his household, and his livestock and all his cattle and all his goods which he'd acquired in the land of Canaan. That's where he lived. That's where he chose to dwell. He was parking it among his kinsmen, so to speak, on his wife's side. And he went to another land away from his brother Jacob. And then it says, verse 7, why he went to a different area. It says, for their property had become too great for them to live together, and the land where they sojourned could not sustain them because of their livestock. So Esau lived in the hill country of Seir, and Esau is Edom. So here's the map. I don't know if you can read it or not, but you can certainly see it as it's coming. I'm hoping, is it still coming? Or did that one not come through? Okay, there's the map. Okay. So the big body of blue is the Mediterranean Sea. You see at the very top center, the little gem-sized piece of water, that's the Sea of Galilee, the Jordan River going down south to the longer piece of lands, the Dead Sea. And if you follow that red line down, if you can read it. Can you read it? It says Edom and at the back there, you can read it. Okay. Can you read it way back over there? Can you read Edom? You can't. Okay. So near the bottom of this red line is where Edom is, and it's this whole region below the Dead Sea that's there. It was also called Seir, named after the man Seir who had settled there before apparently Esau intermarried with them, and then it took his name, Red. So this is a long distance to be traveling. And what I need you to try to see is their wealth was so great between them that essentially in the land of Israel, on the left side of the River Jordan, Jacob's wealth was there with his livestock, and Esau's was so great that he had to travel way down south to put his crops in his livestock down there. So massive fortunes that God had blessed these men with that were the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and then now that's who we have. The generations of Esau's 5 sons and 10 sons in Seir. It says, these are the records of the generations of Esau, the father of the Edomites in the hill country of Seir. These are the names of Esau's sons. So remember, Eliphaz was the first son mentioned. I showed you 5. So we're dealing with the sons of the first son, the grandsons of Esau. These are the son of Esau's wife, Adah. And then Reuel, this is the second son, the son of Esau's wife, Basemath. So now it highlights Eliphaz. The sons of Eliphaz, or Esau's grandsons from Adah, were Teman, Omar, Zepho, Gatam, and Kenaz. And then we have Timnah was a concubine of Esau's son Eliphaz, and she bore Amalek to Eliphaz. If you know anything about Israel's history, the Amalekites were strong opponents, enemies of Israel. This is written by Moses many years later. And so the people that would be reading this text of Genesis would see where the Amalekites came from as this particular son is born not to Adah, but to Timnah, a concubine. So she's set off as a second status wife there to Esau's son Eliphaz. And it gives the summary statement. These are the sons of Esau's wife Adah. Then we have the sons of Reuel. And there's 4 of them mentioned here. Nahath, Zerah, Shammah, and Mizah. And these are the sons of Esau's wife Basemath. And now it goes to not one of the direct sons, but it goes to Oholibama's sons, who was married to Esau. So we've been discussing grandsons, but now we're going to sons of Esau's wife. So these are sons, and she bore to Esau, not to Esau's sons, but to Esau, Jeush and Jalam and Korah. These are the same that were listed in verse 5. Now, these descendants became what they called chiefs. Chiefs are political or military leaders. And so we kind of have a repetition, but recognizing their status, and Amalek is brought in here. And you can see this, if you want to see it a little more clearly, you can see it on the back of your insert, if you can read the fine print of the little family trees that I put there. These are the sons of Eliphaz, the chiefs of the sons of Esau. The sons of Eliphaz, the firstborn of Esau, are Chief Teman, Chief Omar, Chief Zepho, Chief Kenaz, Chief Korah, Chief Gatam. And now we see Amalek, Chief Amalek, the Amalekites, are brought in here as having the same essential status. It was wondered by some of the commentaries if they became kind of a military political alliance. Their various descendants, like tribal leaders and those who they led that were underneath them, they formed a confederation that would fight against those who would oppose them. Then it says, this, from the sons of Reuel. These are the sons of Reuel, Esau's sons, Chief Nahath, Chief Zerah, Chief Shammah, and Chief Mizah. These are the chiefs descended from Reuel in the land of Edom, and they're the sons of that second wife, Basemath, in that first column that we had. Then we have from the sons of Oholibama. These are the sons of Oholibama, Chief Jeush, Chief Jalam, and Chief Korah. These are the same names as listed in verse 5 and verse 14. And their chiefs, these are the chiefs descended from Esau's wife, Oholibama, the daughter of Anah. And these are the sons of Esau, that is Edom, or Red, and these are their chiefs. So now we're going to go to the sons of Seir, the Horite. Seir was the earlier occupant of the Edom area that I showed you on the map. And they intermarried with some of Esau's descendants. And so it highlights them for that reason. Esau had intermarried with them. These are the sons of Seir the Horite, the inhabitants of the land. And it's going to list 7 of them. Lotan and Shobal and Zibeon and Anah. Have you heard that name before? And Dishon and Ezer and Dishan. Notice the O-N on Dishon and A-N on Dishan for the differences. And now we see that they are chiefs. The sons descended from the Horites, the sons of Seir in the land of Edom. The sons of Lotan were Hori and Hemam. And Lotan's sister was Timnah. Now, who was Timnah? Do you remember her? Timnah was the concubine of Eliphaz's son, Esau's son Eliphaz. And she was the mother of Amalek. The Amalekites came from her. So she's brought in this way. And each of those sons, the sons of Shobal, Alvin and Mahanath and Ebal and Shepho and Onam, the sons of Zibeon, this is the third son of Seir, Aya and Anah. And it says, he is the Anah who found the hot springs in the wilderness when he was pasturing the donkeys of his father Zibeon. Now then, can you see a Biri there? Spring man? If it's Anah and spring man? I'm trying to help you see what is shades. It's kind of like in the that brushed metal. Not all is clear, but it lets us postulate that this Anah and Biri could be the same. And then my chart that showed you the wives gives you reasons why they could be the same. Dr. Walke talks about these hot springs. He says this is the only anecdote in this genealogy. So we got one story that's told. The meaning of the word hot springs in Hebrew is uncertain. The Targum and Jewish traditions think it means mules, and that Anna was the first to crossbreed the horse and donkey. The Vulgate, which is the Latin translation of the scriptures, and Syriac, another translation, has hot springs, which may support the Arabic word wahima. Yamim and wahima, do they sound alike to you? To be hot. Others think it means vipers, according to the Arabic word yam, spirits in the forms of snakes. But I'm going with hot springs because Beery means spring man. So I'm going to go with that. And then we have, it changes, the children of Anna. It's not talking about sons of, like all the other places it goes children. These are the children of Anna, who is Oholibama's father. Dishon is a son, and Oholibama the daughter of Anna. So Esau married Oholibama, and she is related to the children, to Anna, who is related to Seir. So what you see is that there's a intermarriage between the descendants of Esau and the descendants of Seir. Then you have the sons of Dishon, Hemam and Eshban and Ithron and Karan. The sons of Ezer, Bilhan and Zaavan and Achan. The sons of Dishan, Uz and Aran are their names. And then the chiefs, which are these same names we've just gone over: Chief Lotan, Chief Shobal, Chief Zibian, Chief Anna. It's like you had to recognize not only their name, but their status as political and military leaders. And the summary statement: these are the chiefs descended from the Horites according to their various chiefs in the land of Seir. And now we have a king status that's highlighted. These are the kings who reigned in the land of Edom before any king reigned over the sons of Israel. When did that happen? That happened after the conquest. That happened after the period of the judges. And then Saul is asked of the tribe of Benjamin to become the king. So it's way before that. The point is, there were kings in Edom. And it mentions them. Bela, the son of Beor, reigned in Edom, and the name of the city that was Dinhabah. And it's an unknown locale. We don't know where it is. Then he died. And then there was Jobab, the son of Zerah, and Basra became king in his place. And then Jobab died. And you see this, he became king, he reigned, he died. And that's the pattern that you see throughout here. Husham of the land of the Temanites became king in his place. Then Husham died. And then Hadad, the son of Bedad, who defeated Midian in the field of Moab, became king in his place. And the name of his city was Avith, and we don't know where it is. Then Hadad died. Walke has some comments. Walke's one of my Hebrew professors. Well, I used to teach at Dallas. He wasn't my prof. This is the name of the Semitic storm god, Hadad is, that's identified with Baal or Baal, the successor to El, who was the head of the Canaanite pantheon among the Canaanite religions. So maybe it's related somehow to history with this guy's. Samlah of Masrekah became king in his place. Then Samlah died, and Shaul of Rehoboth on the Euphrates River became king in his place. Then Shaul died. And then Baal Hanan, the son of Akbor, became king in his place. And then Baal Hanan, the son of Akbor, died. And Hadar became king in his place. The name of his city was Pau, unidentified. And his wife's name was Mehetabel, daughter of Matred, daughter of Mezahab. Now, you're hanging in with me. Thank you for keeping on trying. We just got this little section, verses 40 through 43. And then we'll get to some applications. Now these are the names of the chiefs, descended from Esau according to their families and localities by their names. Same as verse 12 and verse 22, Chief Timnah, then Chief Alva, Chief Jethereth, Chief Aholibama, which I think is the wife. I was wondering, could this be a guy's name too? Because all these others are guys. But in no place, no commentators brought it up, and the only Aholibamas we found so far are the wife of Esau. So I go, could this be this way? Chief Elah. Ekah is on the Gulf of Aqaba and southernmost boundary of Edom. Chief Penan, Chief Kenaz, Chief Teman. You see him earlier in verse 11, 15, and 34. And Chief Mizbar. Then Chief Magdiel, Chief Aram. And these are the chiefs of Edom. It says in verse 43, that is Esau, the father of the Edomites, according to their habitations where they lived, in the land of their possession. They took over that area. Now, the father of the Edomites might be significant here. And you go, what's that big deal? In Genesis 25, verse 23, God had prophetically revealed to Rebekah when she was pregnant with twins these words, 2 nations are in your womb. Okay? Who was the first nation? The descendants of Jacob that we've been studying, those 12 sons, the fathers of the 12 tribes of Israel. Jacob is renamed Israel. Israel is the first nation. But here it says the father of the Edomites. And the Edomites are a nation that have chiefs, and there were kings that were there, political alliances apparently that occurred. And so what we're seeing is the fulfillment of what God had promised way early before, that this is what would occur. Dr. Constable in his study note says, perhaps the major lesson of this genealogy is that secular greatness develops faster than spiritual greatness, and consequently the godly must wait patiently for the fulfillment of God's promises. They don't have all the land yet that's been promised, the Israelites. But I'm going to highlight a few applications now that I hope you'll be able to see from the text and the background information that I gave you. First is that God is faithful in keeping His promises. So learn to wait on Him, to trust Him to keep His word in His perfect timing, and to have confidence in the future that He's promised, even if you may not see it in your lifetime. And you might be going, Larry, I'm not seeing it yet. And that's okay. I'll try to explain. In Genesis 12 and Genesis 15, God had promised that He would multiply Abraham's descendants. And we see that, the multiplication of descendants in this text, do we not? You have sons and grandsons that are descendants from Abraham to Isaac to Jacob, well, in this case to Esau. Then we have all these Edomites. That's part of what happened. And I want to give you some context. I said learn to wait on God to do so, because God's timing is perfect. And I want to rehearse some of God's timing. Abraham waited 25 years for the birth of Isaac. He was 75 when God promised Isaac would be born to him and Sarah. And they had that child when he was 100. Okay? 25 years. Now Isaac was 40 when he got married. So Abraham then would have been 140. If he was 100 when he had the first son, and Isaac was married when he was 40, then Abraham was 140. And Rebekah had twins when Isaac was 60, so 20 years later. So Abraham would have been 160 when he had known Isaac and then Esau and Jacob. Esau was 40 when he got married, and Abraham was dead at least 25 years then. So he never saw all these descendants we're seeing and reading about. Never saw them once with his eyes. But what he did do, if you remember, it says, God says, I'm going to make your children like the stars of the sky. And it says, Abraham believed God, and God reckoned righteousness to him. And what we're seeing here is the fulfillment of what God promised. But Abraham didn't see it all. Hebrews chapter 11, the faith chapter, describes how some of those people that are exercise faith didn't see all the promises. Abraham didn't see this. We see it. And that's why I say God is faithful in keeping his promises. The stars of the sky, the dust of the earth, children are happening. We've seen 12 sons of Jacob. We're seeing, if you count them, if the Amalekite descendant that's through the concubine is set aside, we have 12 sons of Esau that are there, including grandsons, as it spreads. So Abraham never got to see the children born to his grandson Esau, but God kept his word just the same. And we have to trust God that what he's promised us in this life that we haven't seen yet, we haven't seen the reign of Christ for 1,000 years yet. We haven't seen yet what God promises us in heaven, where there's no death and no pain and no sickness. But because God's fulfilled it in the past, I trust him for the future. So we must trust God that what we do not see yet in this life that he's promised, he will certainly fulfill. And his delays in keeping his word doesn't mean that it won't come to pass, even if we don't see it in our lifetime. If Christ doesn't come in our lifetime, doesn't mean he's not coming. It just means we haven't seen it yet. And his faithfulness in the past is our assurance of his faithfulness in the future. So we trust God. Secondly, choose your mate very carefully, as your choice of a spouse very much indicates the quality of your heart toward God. Esau married wives from the land of Canaan. And where did he settle? Did he settle in the land of Israel that God had promised to Abraham and Isaac and Jacob? No. He didn't settle with the covenant people. He settled in his own land, south, away from that land. So be a growing Christian. Marry a growing Christian. Not just someone who says they're a believer. Marry someone who's dynamically growing. Esau's marriages caused grief to both of his parents. And ultimately, they opposed the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. They became enemies. And you would see that after the wilderness wanderings when they're coming up from the land, among other places. Thirdly, individuals, and that means you, matter to God. Why did I read all those names? Couldn't I have just summarized them and skipped them? Yep. Did I want to? Yep. God revealed every one of those names. God made them in their mother's wombs. They were fearfully and wonderfully made. God numbers their days and knows the hair on their heads. And God recorded them so that we, thousands of years later, would read and study them and think about them. Now let me ask you something. Are you boring? Does your life matter? Are you important to God? Do your children matter to God? How many people know your names? How many people know your children's names? On the global scale and on the scale of history, most of us are dots on a radar, little itty bitty tiny blips you might not even see. Most of us aren't famous or known or recorded in history, except county books that say marriage license and death certificates, that kind of stuff. But you're important. And there's much we don't know about all these people. But God knows their name. He knows your name. He doesn't forget you. We don't have to be significant as the world defines it for us to be significant. And if I've thought nothing else about the genealogies I go, what it tells me is we are important to Him because they're important to Him. And I hope that's worth pondering. I want you to say this out loud right now. And I mean talking about you, not talking about me. Say, I am important to God. Say it out loud. I am important to God. And you could put lots of other statements. I matter to Him. He created me. He knows my name. He knows the hairs on my head. He's numbered the days of my life before there's yet one of them, but He says you matter. And this genealogy of a bunch of names we don't know anything about tells me they matter to God. And if they matter to God, you and I matter to God. Same principle. Not everybody knows their history. Not everybody knows us. But we matter. You matter. I'm going to go back to the sermon title that I put here as a start is A Drifting Heart and a Drifting Home. He drifted from God and he settled in Edom. But what are you doing? As I need to ask myself, what am I doing? What are you doing to ensure that your heart does not drift from God? And that you keep your eternal home and an eternal perspective with God in focus. If we don't, we'll start living for the here and now and deciding maybe this isn't important. I could make more money. I could be more popular. I could gain power. I could get a bigger house or a bigger car or whatever the better thing is than pursuit of God. But if this world is not my home, and if I'm just a passing through, and if my treasures are laid up somewhere beyond the blue, and the angels or God one day says, it's time for you to come home from heaven's open door, I won't feel at home in this world anymore. And that's what we got to make sure our hearts don't become like Esau's. We have to be like, even with their flaws, the people of faith that were Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob that pursued the promises of God. Father, we pray that you'll help us to find meaning even in genealogies. I thank you for these here in person and online that have worked through this hard text. I thank you that you care about us. I thank you that you call us to faithfulness to you and help us not to drift in terms of our home, in terms of our heart. And I pray that we would live in obedience to you, in yieldedness to you, and that we would always have an eternal perspective. I pray it in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you, Larry. Please stand as we sing this final song. Jesus said, "Follow me."